Hello, all, and thank you so much for tuning into COVID Conversations by way of WNCU 90.7 FM. We're using this platform to talk about how the coronavirus is affecting the way that we live today. And I have the good pleasure of having with me Professor Irving Joyner. Now, he is a professor at the North Carolina Central University School of Law. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing so well. And we were talking just a little bit ago about the marvels of technology and how it allows us to still have face-to-face communication in these trying times.
Well, I'm glad I invented this to allow the population to have this benefit. But yeah, I'm using it as much as possible, even though I'm technologically illiterate.
What an amazing man you are. So I wanted to talk to you about you as as historian, as a legal professional, and maybe some of the things that you've seen. I know that you are um, working to preserve the history of the Wilmington Riots of 1898. So could we talk about that injustice, and then if you could like juxtapose that information into our present to talk about the situation that we see ourselves in as African Americans today?
Well, you know, in 1898, we were at the end of what is called the First Reconstruction, where African Americans were fighting successfully to participate in the fledgling democracy that existed here in North Carolina, and to have a voice in governmental affairs. And there was a active effort on the part of right-wing whites and Confederate, former Confederate officers to undermine that effort. And that led to a physical confrontation in Wilmington, North Carolina, where with the aid of military forces, these white rebels went into Wilmington and basically shot up the African American community, which then led to the taking away of the right and privileges of African Americans to vote. And so since 1900s, the African American community was without that voice and could not vote. And it took virtually 90 years struggle after that to regain the right for African Americans to vote. Now, that is a historical point, but it draws a lot of similarities to efforts that are going on right now in our North Carolina General Assembly and in communities around the state, where there are efforts to undermine the rights of African Americans to vote and to have their voice heard and felt in governmental affairs. So it is a robust battle that is going on. We are fighting that battle in the streets. We're fighting that battle in the legislative chambers. We're fighting that battle in the courts to ensure that African Americans have the right to vote. And then at the same time, we're trying to focus on encouraging and mobilizing African Americans to actually come out and vote, because having the right to vote and not voting is meaningless. So we want to educate our community about the importance of their voice being heard and their being in a position to speak truth to power. And that's no more significant than right now when we just finished with this George Floyd murder by a police officer in Minneapolis, Minnesota. All the result of governmental action, which allowed these police officers to have control enough that they would put George Floyd in that position. And if we're going to bring about any change in this society, we need to stand up, speak up, and be loud and passionate about having our voice heard and speaking truth to power.
So can you talk about the difference between this movement and maybe the movement of the 1960s for justice for African Americans, what's the differences, and then how can those differences be turned around into positives that could push the movement forward?
Well, in the 1960s, we had a reawakening of this sense of democracy and a increase in the vigilance of African Americans to demand to participate in the democracy. For many years, we had been kind of docile to the discrimination that we were facing. And then young people came along in 1960 and began to say, we're not going to take this anymore. And led by SNCC and other young African American civil rights leaders and activists, the community awoke to the need to be assertive and to protect their interests. And then, there was a sense of success that occurred as a result of that, and then some complacency set in. So what we are doing now, I guess, is kind of reviving that reawakening spirit among people within our community and also among whites who have been the beneficiaries of the docile reaction by African Americans and the desire to keep things as they were and people being comfortable with the successes that they had. Now we know, and that knowledge is kind of broad-based now, that if we don't continue to struggle together, join together, and solidify our ranks, then the benefits that we've been able to accrue can easily be taken away, just as it was in November 1898.
So what about leadership? Back in the 1960s, there were definite figureheads and leaders. There was Martin Luther King Jr. that you could look directly to. There was Malcolm X and so many others who were in the forefront. But this movement, in my opinion, seems like it doesn't have like a centralized head or organization. I know Black Lives Matter is at the forefront, but there isn't anyone giving directives to say, get out to vote, to say we need to organize in Washington, to say we organize around the 50 states. So what about leadership?
Well, I think it's very similar, though. When you look at it in the 1960s, there were a number of different leaders. Martin Luther King being just one, Stokely Carmichael and Ralph Bunche and Floyd McKissick and others were in the forefront. But it was the collective efforts of young people, young militants, who, as they were called at that time, that demanded change. And those young people were going out in communities at the local level to inspire people to join the movement. Today, I think we're in pretty much the same place, because there are a number of different people who share the spotlight, but it is young people now who are emerging as the as leadership. Black Lives Matter being just one example of that. Not an organization, but a movement where young people are beginning to assert their desire and their passion and their movement to speak truth to power, and they are energizing not only the African American community, but uniquely white communities and Asian communities and Native communities and Hispanic communities, and bringing people together that typically had not been done by the older generations that are more set in their ways. So I think that in many ways that we are talking about pretty much the same emergence of leadership and the development of leadership on a broader basis than we've had before. And I doubt seriously if we really need a leader in this movement, because we have so many different iterations within our community, and we have to have the ability to reach all of those.
So what are your feelings seeing Black people in particular protesting during the coronavirus pandemic being that Black people are among the population where the virus has taken its greatest toll?
Well, there's a sense of danger that exists as people go out to protest in these various events that are going on. But it also speaks to the fervent passion that people are feeling about the injustices that they've witnessed. And I liken the George Floyd situation to the murder of Emmett Till that occurred down in Money, Mississippi. Back in the early 60s, where it was a galvanizing force for a lot of people who were just outraged that a young boy would be subjected to that kind of harm. And if that could happen to Emmett Till, it could happen to anyone. And I think that the picture of George Floyd having a knee in his throat, and this officer dispassionately sitting on top of him, and people actually watching him die, has the same cathartic result as with Emmett Till. And people all over the place are talking about what that picture meant to them, and Floyd calling out for his mother and reiterating again and again that he couldn't breathe, and the inhumanity exhibited by those police officers in that situation has ignited a fire that is very much like the fire that was ignited with the torturous death of Emmett Till. So those images, I think, are raw, and it is that rawness that created this passion, and people kind of push aside this notion of the coronavirus and the fears of that, because as for African Americans, you run the danger of dying from coronavirus or police misconduct. And either way, you end up dead. So you have to take a chance and fight against whatever those fears are to have your voices heard.
What do you see as maybe the greatest weapon against white supremacy in 2020?
The greatest weapon that I see is mobilizing white people in anti-racist campaigns. The defeat of racism is uniquely in the hands of white people to correct and change white people. We can't do that. We have to mobilize our forces within African American communities, but African Americans can't carry the burden of sanctifying white people. White people need to carry that burden. They need to join this struggle, and they need to correct each other and to straighten out each other so that they begin to view us as being human and worthy of being a part of this democracy. We have enough problems just trying to motivate our own people. So we can't motivate our household to focus on this democracy and then go over and try to reform some recalcitrant white people who don't want to hear us anyway and are afraid of the very image that we present. So we need white allies who go into white communities to help them understand white privilege and the dehumanization that African Americans and other racial minorities have faced.
And then if white people don't, then how do we fight?
We have to continue to protest. We have to continue to make our voices heard. We have to be passionate in the future as we are right now to ensure that this message is constantly presented to them in every forum that they find themselves.
All right. So I want to switch gears just a little bit to talk about the North Carolina Supreme Court and their ruling that would give death row inmates the right to have their cases reheard. So talk about what's happening in the legal system in North Carolina as it relates to these people who are on death row.
Well, this was a monumental opinion by the North Carolina Supreme Court in the case of State of North Carolina versus Andrew Ramseur, in which death row inmates basically claimed that they were sentenced to death because of discrimination that existed in the jury selection process in the trials in which they were convicted. And we do know that it has been a practice in the past by district attorneys who are prosecuting these death row cases that they excuse all of the African Americans from jury, such that you have all white juries or no more than 1 or 2 African Americans who sit on that jury. So there is widespread racial discrimination in the jury selection process. And this opinion basically says that those inmates or those death row inhabitants now who were convicted by these all-white juries or in those juries where racial discrimination occurs, have the right to go into court to present evidence about that disparity and then have their death sentence reduced to life. This isn't an attack on the convictions, but rather on the discriminatory use of race in jury selection resulting in the imposition of the death penalty in those cases.
Okay, that's all the questions that I have. Anything that I may not have asked that you'd like to share with us?
No, that was good. You got me. You got me. That was. We need to package that and send it out to Lottie Dottie and everybody.
Well, that's exactly what this forum is for, to send out to Lottie Dottie and everybody who listens to our station and also who would take advantage of viewing these conversations that I'm taping on Zoom. Zoom is amazing. Technology is amazing. You're amazing. Thank you so much. As a historian, as a fighter for justice, you're standing in the trenches just to help people understand and then to help bring justice where justice has no light. We appreciate you very much.
Well, thank you for the invitation, and you're just so kind.
Yes, sir. Okay. Be good.
See ya.
All right.